Hello, this is Jay Mitchell. We're back for another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. First, we have Florida Republicans introduce the Bible Says So bill will eliminate any academic penalty for expressing a religious viewpoint. Posted by from JoeMyGod.com, posted by CH4Lux. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is, ultimately any academic institution can enforce any penalty it feels like for whatever or reason it feels like. But regardless, I think the libertarian position is if a private college wants to do so, the state shouldn't be telling them what they can and can't do. Public colleges, on the other hand, are going to be inherently subject to the will of the state, so they have less of a choice in the matter. And with that being said, I personally think the libertarian position is, get rid of public schools entirely, make all schools private, so you don't have states pass bills like this telling schools what they can and can't do. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Trump says the U.S. struck a big facility in campaign against Venezuela, quote from nytimes.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they said, President Trump said in a radio interview that the United States had knocked out a big facility last week as part of his administration's campaign against Venezuela, an apparent reference to an American attack on a drug trafficking site. American officials said that Mr. Trump was referring to a drug facility in Venezuela and that it was eliminated, but provided no details. Military officials said they have no information to share, and the Central Intelligence Agency declined to comment. The White House declined to comment. And yeah, personally, I personally don't think the U.S. government should be drone striking in Venezuela, just like I don't think they should be drone striking in Iraq or pretty much any country in the Middle East for that matter, or any other country in the world for that matter. But, ultimately the U.S. government has legal monopoly and is forced to bomb wherever it feels like, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next we have pipe bomb suspect told FBI he targeted U.S. political parties because they were in charge, memo says from APnews.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, he confessed to placing them outside the RNC and DNC and acknowledged feeling disillusioned by the 2020 election, but both political parties and fake claims by Trump and some of his allies that the contests have been stolen. And yeah, personally, I don't think this is the real suspect. I think this is just the FBI guy the FBI saying is the suspect. I think that DC police officer that the Blaze was going after said did it probably was the one who actually did it. But, the FBI is going to be inherently corrupt and go after whoever it feels like, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. This guy might have done it for all I know, but, I definitely do think that it's more likely it was an inside job and that the DC police officer did it, that as the Blaze said, because, I trust the Blaze over what the FBI says. And it's like, Reddit's interesting like that. They say, oh, you gotta believe everything. You can't just believe everything you can't just believe everything the government says. Not the Orange Man's back in power, but they trust the FBI over the Blaze in this instance because the FBI is the one that's more supporting their narratives, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have doesn't matter which side you're on, posted by ExpertSwan8267, and that's a cross post from the America First meme subreddit. And that looks like a meme from Being Libertarian. It says hard to swallow pills, and then there's a tweet from Daniel Denehy. Nobody will go to jail for Epstein stuff. Nobody will go to jail for smelling in daycares. But if you're a middle-class family who parks in a double yellow or pays a tax bill 0.1 days late, the entire legal system will activate to crush you. And I would agree with that. It just goes to show you that the American legal system is inherently going to be biased against those in positions of authority and wealth and other elite statuses. But if you're just average Joe, it can activate any force to crush you for whatever reason, and that's why I very much don't care for it. Like any legal system, the U.S. legal system is going to be inherently hierarchical and subject to bias, and I think that's very important to remember, especially when looking at it from a libertarian perspective. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Republican behind Epstein Files Act response to Trump lowlife taunt from TheGuardian.com, posted by The Way to Beauty. And yeah, personally, I think Trump's quite more fits the description of lowlife than Thomas Massie does. But if Trump wants to call him a lowlife, I think he should be able to. I believe in freedom of speech. But I do think it's kind of ironic because Trump, he's clearly not that morally upstanding character. But if he wants to call anyone else a lowlife or say whatever he wants to say about anyone, I've supported his freedom of speech to do so, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Freemasons seek injunction against Met policy requiring officials to declare membership from TheGuardian.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added Freemasonry is a religion now. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for Freemasons. If there was one U.S. political party I'd ever bring back from the dead, it'd be the anti-Masonic Party, because, the Freemasons might be the ones who are really running things behind the scenes, just like, like the Illuminati and Skull and Bones and the Bilderberg Group and the WEF and all those types. But, ultimately, if the Met wants to have a policy requiring officers to declare membership, if they should be able to. But if they don't want to, they shouldn't be forced to do so. I would say, ultimately, everyone's going to justify it. They want to justify, when you're applying for a job, you usually don't have to give your religion. But, ultimate Freemasonry isn't a religion, so, I guess they should be able to ask for that. But, if an employer does want to ask for your religion, I think they should be able to. They should be able to ask whatever they want to. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have the Republican idea of free speech, posted from Imgur.com, posted by Swamp Yankee Dan. And that's a meme of a Trump truth. And he proved if network newscasts and their late night shows are almost 100% negative to President Donald J. Trump, MAGA, and the Republican Party, shouldn't their very valuable broadcast licenses be terminated? I say yes. And then the Patriot Takes says this is how dictators talk. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is, we shouldn't have broadcast licenses forever in the first place. You shouldn't need a license for anything. What's next? License to toast in your own damn toaster, as Daryl Perry famously said, the 2016 Libertarian Convention presidential debate. But, I think, broadcast television is something that, Trump's really the only one propping up at this point. No one under 60 really watches it, I would say. And I like what this Tom Q. Masters commented here. We should just terminate broadcast television. Who even watches it anymore? I don't think we should use the state to terminate broadcast television. I don't know if that's what they're implying, but I do think, we should theoretically terminate it by just letting it become irrelevant, which, if Trump wasn't constantly saying, well, the media is constantly after me, people are increasingly just ignoring what they say. Look, Trump managed to win 2024 despite the entire legacy media apparatus pretty much being against him, so it just goes to show you, people are increasingly just don't care what they have to say, and, Trump just gives them more attention than they deserve, which gives them more legitimacy. And I personally think the libertarian position is, Trump should just ignore them, and just let them fall into the dustbin of irrelevance. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have CIA carried out drone strikes on port facility in Venezuela, marking the first known U.S. attack inside the country, from CNN.com, posted by LegioX. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that. I don't think the U.S. should be bombing or drone striking any other country, as I said earlier. But that being said, I don't know if it will escalate much beyond this. I think as I noted in the past, I think the Iraq War was so damaging to the Republican Party back in the 2000s. I think it will be a while before we have another boots on the ground conflict. But that being said, just because there aren't boots on the ground doesn't mean that makes this right either. Ideally, the U.S. government shouldn't be drone striking or bombing anywhere. But they pretty much always seem to have to be doing so, regardless of what the current political climate or atmosphere is. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.